history of breathlessness, chest pain, palpitation, no history of altered consciousness, no history of reduced urine output, no history of polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, and there was no history of dialysis or any reduced urine output. No history of present pregnancy. It was a spontaneous conception. During first trimester, UPT was done, and pregnancy was confirmed at 1.5 months. Folic acid and iron supplements were taken. Second trimester, quickening was felt at 5th month, and injection TT was given 2 doses with 2 weeks apart. Iron and calcium tablets were given. Anomaly scan was done, and it was told to be normal. History of increased BP at 6 months, and she was put on tablet labetalol 50 mg twice a day. And third trimester, she has come with above complaints, and she is now appreciating fetal movements. Obstetric history. She is married for 5 years. Second degree consanguineous. Yes, sir.
So let's finish this presenting illness. Here, the main thing is whatever the patient is telling, it should be in patient's own words.
Yes.
So we should not be using any medical terminologies in the presenting illness, because, like as you said, patient is not having any polydipsia, patient is not having any step dialysis. Like that, there's not any medical terms. Okay, and whatever you are mentioning, it should be kind of more objective thing. For example, you are telling patient is able to appreciate fetal movements. So can you further elaborate on that? How exactly you tell the history?
Sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
You are telling patient is having perceiving the fetal movements.
Yes, sir.
So in that case, how exactly you can tell it in a complete way?
She has felt the quickening at the 5th month, sir, and following which
again, the quickening is not the patient's terminology. So you suppose patient telling, I can appreciate the fetal movement once in a week. Is it acceptable?
Not acceptable.
So you have to tell a patient is able to feel the fetal movements every hour, every 1 hour, every second hourly. Like that, whatever the patient is telling, that is more objective, the way of telling history. Okay. Then, so what are the positive findings from the presenting history?
First thing, she is a primary gravida, sir. The second thing, she has exposed to, she has first time having a history of raised BP after 6 months of pregnancy, sir. That is after 20 weeks. And history of leg swelling was present for 2 months, sir. And from the family history, and she has no history of any family history of any preeclampsia or hypertension, or previously before the pregnancy she was not hypertensive, and family history of there was no any fetal malformations or a preterm delivery or hidden molar pregnancy. There was no such histories were present, and
yeah.
And she was not a smoker, and she's not a diabetic, sir, before the pregnancy and also during the pregnancy. And she has no history suggestive of any chronic kidney disease, and so these are towards my points.
So why did you ask the history of smoking?
In pregnant women, the history of smoking is not it's not been associated with the preeclampsia or it's actually a kind of opposite mindset. No smokers are actually more prone for preeclampsia or hypertension in pregnancies.
That means you will advise the patient to have smoke?
Sir, actually, or he say,
Okay, yeah, but for a completion check, you should be asking that. Okay, then?
And by ethnicity, she's not an African or is not a black woman, sir. And she's not also an nulliparous, sir. She's not also a nulliparous woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with your presentation.
So, obstetric history, married for 5 years. It was a secondary consanguineous marriage, and menstrual history, menarche at the age of 15 years. Regular menstruation with 4 to 5 days and 28 day cycle. No clots or pain during the cycle. LMP was 10th of May 2019, and the expected date of delivery was 17 February 2020. So gestational age was 37 weeks. Past history, no history of hypertension, tuberculosis, asthma, or any history of blood transfusion or surgeries, or any history of heart diseases, seizures, thyroid diseases, or any anaphylaxis history, or allergy history. Family history, no history of hypertension, preeclampsia, no history of multiple pregnancies, congenital anomalies, or asthma or TB in pregnancy. Personal history, she consumed mixed diet, has a normal appetite with a normal bowel and bladder habits regular, and there are no habitual histories like smoking, alcoholic. General exam, summary of history. It's a 27-year female, primary gravida with 36 weeks of gestational age, with a singleton pregnancy, with history of hypertension, index swelling, has come for safe confinement.
Okay, so how will you proceed?
Next, I will go for general examination, sir. She's I'll first take the consent, sir. She's a moderate, young adult lady, moderate build and nourished, sir. Conscious, cooperative, oriented time, place, person. Height was 150 centimeters, weight is 60 kg, BMI is 24.1 kg per centimeter. Pulse rate was 100 per minute, regular, normal in rate, rhythm, character, volume. All peripheral present. No vessel wall thickening were present, sir, and no delays were present, sir. BP was 140/80 millimeter, measured in left lateral position in right upper arm, sir. Respiratory rate was 18 per minute and regular, sir. Then she was error was present, sir. No ictus, cyanosis, clubbing, lymphadenopathy, bilateral pitting edema was present, sir. Thyroid and breast for examination was normal, sir. Coming out to systemic examination, CVS chest was symmetrical. No scars were present, sir, and no visible pulsations were present. Both heart sound S1 and S2 were here at all areas, and no murmurs were present, sir. Respiratory system, bilateral air entry was present, and the normal visible breath sounds were heard, sir. Central nervous system, conscious, sir. She was oriented, and no focal neurological deficits were seen, sir. Perabdominal examination, abdomen was generalized uniform distension was present. Umbilicus was everted, sir. Striae gravidarum and the linea gravidarum was present, sir. No dilated wings, no scars. Hernial orifices were intact. All quadrants moved equally and during respiration. Palpation, the uterus size was 31 weeks. Corresponding uterus was relaxed, sir. Fundal grip was breached. Right lateral grip was limb beats were present. Left lateral grip back was present. Cephalic pole was present. Auscultation, fetal heart rate was 136 per minute, beats per minute at the left spinal umbilical lines. Airway examination, face was symmetrical with no disproportions. Mallampati grade was 2. Mouth opening allows more than 3 fingers. No buck teeth or loose tooth or any artificial dentures were present, or no caries tooth were present. Slugs were 1+. Thyrometal distance was normal, sir, and sternometal distance was also normal. Neck movements were full range, sir. Provisional diagnosis, sir. 21-year female, primary gravida with 31 weeks of gestational age, with a singleton pregnancy and
how many weeks?
37 weeks.
How many weeks? 34.
37 weeks, sir.
37 weeks. Okay.
With the controlled gestational hypertension for further management.
Okay. So is your case a 27-year-old preemie with 37 weeks of gestation, right?
Yes.
Now, why do we say this patient is having gestational hypertension?
So, sir, as per the definition of gestational hypertension, the onset of hypertension was in a previously normotensive woman, and it was after 20th week of pregnancy, and it was over 140 over 90, and she was started on tablet Labitala in previous settings, sir. So, this is gestational hypertension.
Suppose patient is has not given the history to you that she may be a known hypertensive, but she didn't tell you that she was a hypertensive patient. Then how do you rule out chronic hypertension in this patient?
Sir, so in chronic hypertension compared to preeclampsia patients, like gestational hypertension patients, the end organ damages like retinal changes will not be present. So I'll go to retinal any retinal changes or echo findings to rule out any left ventricular hypertrophy or left ventricular hypertrophy. To look for any chronic changes of hypertension, I look for.
For that, all these changes should develop and should be having a hypertension for more prolonged period. So patient may not have those changes. Okay. Any other investigation we can do it to rule out or differentiate the chronic hypertension and gestational hypertension?
It will be new onset proteinuria, sir.
Okay. Suppose patient is having hypertension along with the proteinuria. What is your diagnosis?
It is a preeclampsia, sir.
Okay. So how do you classify the hypertensive disorders in pregnancy?
So gestational hypertension, and because preeclampsia without severe features, mild preeclampsia, chronic hypertension with superimposed preeclampsia, and eclampsia.
So you were telling about mild preeclampsia. Is this terminology still used, or are they using different terminology? Like what is currently they use? Earlier we used to mild preeclampsia and severe preeclampsia. So now there is no more mild preeclampsia. Right? They call it as preeclampsia
without severe features.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I'll go with investigation, sir. Confirm.
Suppose you are on call, you are in your duty room, and this patient is been admitted there in the labor room. The OG resident is calling you over the phone, and you are receiving the phone call. So, what are the possibilities? Like, why the OG resident is calling you? What could be the reason?
She may call for labor for providing labor analysis, sir, or for posting for cesarean section, or for managing or to secure the airway for eclampsia or when she's throwing seizures.
Okay. Or she may be simply calling to do the PSC, and they may be planning to do the procedure later on. So she may want to do the PSC for the patient. Okay. So now she called you and to assess the patient. Okay, you go on and assess the patient, like whatever the history you told, you assess the patient. And she's telling this patient is planned for labor analgesia. So how will you proceed?
So first I will go for I will examine the patient, sir. Examine the patient, and I will.
Whatever the examination findings you have told till now, that is the examination finding. History and examination you have done, and the patient is there in front of you, and the patient is a doctor, and she wants a labor analysis.
So first thing is I will talk with the patient and get the consent of the patient, explain the procedure and consent of the patient, and if the patient is accepting, then I will do necessary investigations like complete hemogram for hemoglobin, for assessing the hemoglobin status or any hemolysis or any suspected anemia.
Patient is telling patient is a doctor, and she's telling all these investigation done 10 days back. She is giving you all the investigation.
I'll ask to redo the investigation, sir.
Okay, why do you want to redo?
Because it can be a sudden onset of proteinuria. It may increase in severity, or it may proceed on to fulminant types of eclampsia, or it may proceed on to acute hemolysis or HELP syndrome. So I want to note hemolysis and what is the degree of thrombocytopenia in this patient, and what about the renal status of the patient. So to assess the severity.
If the patient could have been progressed further there in the severity of the disease. 10 days back, the investigation was done, so she would have worsened. Even though she is not having any symptoms, so still you want to get the investigation done to rule out. Okay, or it could be just simply a baseline investigation also. Okay, so what are the investigation will do?
So first complete hemogram, sir, to hemoglobin for anemia and rule out hemolysis, and next for hematocrit. Hematocrit thrombocyto, hemoconcentration is one of the feature of preeclampsia and severity of preeclampsia, sir. And
why there is a hemoconcentration in preeclampsia?
Because of the there will be vasospasm with the increased vascular permeability and decrease in the oncotic pressure, sir, in the intravascular compartment. So there will be hemoconcentration aggravated with the anemic changes in the pregnancy.
Okay.
So I will do hemoconcentration, and I will try to see the hematocrit. Next, I will go for total count to rule out any infections. Then platelet count to see the thrombocytopenia, and next I'll go for renal function test. First, I will take urine for the protein, caste, and sugars. Next, serum creatinine to see whether there is a renal involvement. Is that if it is more than 1.1, then it 1.2, then it means there is a renal involvement, and blood urea I will do. Next, liver function test I will do. Total bilirubin. If there is hemolysis, the bilirubin will be more, and enzymes like AST, ALT, it will be elevated again. And there is hepatic insufficiency, and LDH, if there is hemolysis, again LDH will be elevated. Random blood sugar I will do. Then bleeding time and clotting time, and coagulation profile I will do. Next, PT prothrombin time and INR I will do, sir.
Okay, so this patient, this patient, why do you want to get the urine analysis done?
Sir? Come again, sir.
Why do you want to get the urine analysis? You want to do the urine analysis, no?
Urine analysis for first to 24 hour. If there is protein in the urine, and
a patient is planned for lab analysis here.
Yes, sir.
So you would like to wait for 24 hours to get the.
No, sir, dipstick.
Okay.
Dipstick. If it is more than 1 plus. Significant of eclampsia, sir. Then RLs I will do creatinine protein ratio, urine protein ratio. If it is more than 0.3, I will confirm, sir.
Okay. Suppose urine you are telling it comes 2 plus. Okay. Your HP is 8.3. Hematocrit is around 30. Okay, TLC is 5,000. Okay, then what you will do?
Uh,
You told only this much investigation, or you want to do some other investigations also?
platelet I will do.
Want to do platelets?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, it's around 1 lakh. Yeah.
Then
So now patient is asking, I want labor anesthesia. So will you give labor anesthesia or not?
yes, I will give labor anesthesia, but I will I will yes, sir. I will give labor anesthesia. That's all.
Okay. Suppose patient is having a urine of 2 plus. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So still you want to give labor anesthesia? Or is there any relation between proteinuria and your labor epidural?
Sir, I will try to prevent any acute fall in BP, sir. That may aggravate the renal insufficiency during labor anesthesia.
Okay. No, what I want is the urinary proteins of 2 plus, what does it indicate? What does it tell to you?
It indicates severe preeclampsia.
Severe preeclampsia. Okay. So what do you do?
So I will monitor with severe preeclampsia. I will monitor with um, um, I will control the fall in BPs are important. I will avoid the hemodynamic shifts during the procedure.
Okay. So this patient, why do you want to give labor anesthesia? What is the advantage? Patient is having preeclampsia. So what is the point of giving labor anesthesia? In what way it is going to be benefit the patient?
By giving labor anesthesia, when there is decrease in pain, it will decrease preload and afterload, and also it will increase the cardiac output in those patients. And it will also reduce the stress response during the labor, and it will optimize the BP also in these patients.
Sorry?
It will optimize BP. BP can be also come down in these patients. Sir.
Okay.
Diabetes.
So other main thing is your benefits for the mother
and
as
also
well as
the
the fetus.
intravenous distribution of blood supply can be maintained. So uteroplacental flow will be good in the baby, and the fetal oxygenation will be good in the babies.
Okay, all right. So now
Sir,
you are planning for, yeah.
Sir, when patient is in labor, patients, the mother will start in hyperventilation. So hyperventilating mother will become alkalotic. So that will causes the haldane effect, causes uploading of oxygen into the mother side, reducing the fetal hemoglobins. So fetal oxygen. So that will cause more hypoxic to the fetus. So that will be prevented with the help of labor analgesia.
Yeah. So what they call it as a hyperventilation syndrome. So whenever the patient is having pain, they hyperventilate. Okay, that is going to cause more catecholamine surge. That is going to cause reduced placental perfusion, reduced blood flow to the uterus. And then when the patient is having hypoventilation, patient relaxes. So they don't take adequate breathing. So patient is going to hypoxia. Again, the patient is going to have reduced oxygenation to the fetus. So this cycle is going to be repeating, hypoventilation and hyperventilation. So that's why we want to give labor anesthesia for any patient is coming for labor. Okay. Yeah, suppose this patient you have planned to give labor analgesia and you have planned everything. The patient is telling, I don't want a labor analgesia. Okay, and the physician is telling this patient will be planning for LSCS tomorrow. So what do you do?
So, so now I'll prepare for LSCS, sir. Now I will prepare the patient. I'll give I'll get appropriate consents from the patient, sir, for if there is no, I will plan for spinal anesthesia. So I'll get consent from the patient, sir, regarding that. Explain the procedure and get consent, and I will optimize the vascular, intravascular volume in the patient, and BP. I will try to optimize the BP in the patient, and
How will you optimize the blood pressure in these patients?
sir, already the patient is on tablet labetalol, sir, 50 mg BID she is on. So
Okay. So why can we give tablet atenolol for this patient?
No, sir. I won't give atenolol, sir. Preferred or labetalol or nifedipine or nitroglycerin, sir.
With all the non-pregnant patients, atenolol is part of initial antihypertensive management. So why not for this patient? Beta blockers.
Beta blockers can cause fetal bradycardia, sir.
Okay, that's one thing. What else?
And also maternal bradycardia, and
the usual clinical doses, it won't cause any maternal bradycardia. Okay, so what is the relation between the beta blockers and the intraplacental blood flow? Okay, I agree with you that beta blocker should not be giving to the pregnant patients. Then what is labetalol?
Pure beta blockers is avoided in patient pregnancy, sir. So usually,
Yes.
combination of alpha and beta blockers should be given. Labetalol is a combination of alpha and beta blockers. So that is why it's advised in patient in
So
pregnant
what
patients.
is labetalol?
It's combination of alpha and beta blockers.
So what is the ratio of alpha and beta blocker?
1:7.
Okay, so 7 is alpha or beta?
7 is beta, sir.
Beta.
So it's like beta blockers, correct? So then on the one hand, you are telling beta blocker should be avoided in these patients, and now the drug of choice for managing preeclampsia to control the blood pressure is labetalol. So why is it so? So whatever the studies they have done, randomized controlled trials, where they have compared many drugs, hydrolysine, nifedipine, and methyl dopa, everything, the labetalol is give a better control of the blood pressure, as well as it is not causing any adverse effects to the fetus. So that is the reason the most commonly they use labetalol as a drug of choice for controlling blood pressure. Okay, so what is the dose of labetalol?
Intravenous dose, sir. I can give 5 mg and 5 mg IV or intermittent.
Patient usually they'll start on oral dose, correct?
Oral dose 50 mg we can or 50 mg body or BD we can raise.
So usual dosage is about 300 to 2,400 milligram per day, the divided doses, sir.
Okay.
In an acute stage, you can give about 10 to 20 milligram IV followed by after 20 minutes, you can give a repeat dose of 20 to 80 milligrams. And then
Yeah, what
repeated,
we're discussing is oral dose.
oral dose is about 300 to 400 milligram per day in divided doses, 3 divided doses.
Okay. So now, before the LSCS, you want to optimize the blood pressure. So you are starting the patient on labetalol. Okay. Now, OG resident is calling you and telling, sir, this patient we got a wrong report. This report, the platelet is not 1 lakh. It's only 90,000. That is from some other patient. So this is the actual platelets. So would you like to change the management or you want to do the same management?
Can do the same management, sir.
So why there is a thrombocytopenia in preeclampsia patients?
Because of the endothelial injury in the patient, sir, the platelet will be consumed over there, and that causes thrombocytopenia. Because of the endothelial injury, the platelet will be consumed in that endothelial area, sir.
I'll be increased platelet aggregation and
yes, good. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, very good.
And also
there'll be increased aggregation clotting around the endothelial damaged endothelium. So there'll be decreased free platelets will be less.
So one thing there is going to be platelet activation and degranulation. So that would itself reduce the function of the platelets. Then because of the aggregation, there is going to be consumption and then reduce the number of platelets. There is going to be both your quality and quantity both will reduce in terms of the platelet count and the function. Okay, so that is the reason for the thrombocytopenia in these patients. Okay, so now the patient is having platelets of 90,000. So what is the plan?
we can, if it is more than 75,000, I can stick to neuraxial anesthesia, sir. So I'll still go with the spinal anesthesia, sir.
So you are planning for spinal anesthesia. Okay, so the patient is planned for LSCS tomorrow. Okay, so today we are going for a PAC. What do you do?
We'll ask to repeat the baseline investigations on the day of surgery, sir. We'll ask for repeat platelet count, hemoglobin count, and bleeding time, clotting time on day of surgeries. And after the
So why do you want to get the bleeding time and clotting time?
For functional assessment of the platelets, sir.
So the bleeding time is not going to be a reflection of your platelet count. So there is going to be assessing the entire coagulation parameter. So if you are going to look at only study the platelet function, the bleeding time is not going to be useful. So again, there's going to be change in the protocol in individual hospitals. So whatever you do it normally, you can tell that. So if you are regularly doing bleeding time and clotting time, you can go ahead and tell. Otherwise, the bleeding time is not going to be suggestive about the platelet count. So if you want the platelet count, you have to get the platelet count, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you want to get the repeat the investigation. So how many times you repeat the investigation? Okay, so now you have repeated the investigation next day morning, and if you get an investigation like this, what do you do? Next day morning, you get an investigation. The investigation is like this. You have a glucose. Can you read that one? What is okay?
Yes, sir.
Can we read out that investigation one by one?
Glucose is 109, urea is 31, creatinine is 0.8, sodium 132, potassium 4.97, chloride 101, calcium 8.4, total bilirubin 8.32, direct is 4.77, total protein is 6.0, albumin 3.2, AST 2007-11, ALT 1496, alkaline phosphatase 241, GGT 33.
Okay. So what do you want to do with this investigation?
So patients is having hemolysis with the raised bilirubin and with the raised enzymes with the hepatic insufficiency, sir.
So why do you say patient is having hemolysis?
Because total bilirubin is more, sir, and
Okay.
AST ALT is also more
Okay.
elevated, and AST is more than 2007-11, so it suggests a
So is there any other investigation will you do to find out or support the finding of hemolysis?
In peripheral smear, I can see hemorrhagic thing and with the raised reticulocytes, and
Okay,
also
good.
cystocytes can be seen. And also LDH I will do. If it is more than 600 international units per liter, I will suspect again
Okay. So more than LDH more than 600, and if you have a peripheral smear, then you can tell conclusively that patient is having a hemolysis. Okay. Here, with only this investigation, what about AST and ALT?
AST is more than 70 international units, sir. ALT is more than 40 international units per liter.
Okay, so what will be the possible diagnosis based on this investigation?
It can be a HELLP syndrome. So patient can proceed to HELLP syndrome.
So what are the diagnostic criteria for HELLP syndrome?
First thing that should be hemolysis, that should be confirmed, and elevated liver enzymes and protein that is platelet less than 1 lakh.
Okay. So is there any other named classification is there?
There are Tennessee classification is there, sir. Mississippi classification is there. Martin classification is there. Partial HELLP syndrome. When there is 1 or 2 features are present. If all the features are present, it is complete HELLP syndrome.
Okay, so what is the Mississippi?
Mississippi, the platelet count, sir. First, it should be less than 1 lakh, and AST should be more than 70, ALT should be more than 40, LDH should be more than 600 international units with the significant hemolysis in the peripheral smears.
Okay, okay. So now all this investigation done, but again, your patient's investigation only this much. Okay. So this is our patient investigation. So we have planned for LHS tomorrow. Okay. So how will you proceed?
On the day of surgery, sir, I'm sorry, pre-medications. Sir, I will first thing I'll optimize the intravascular volume of the patient. I'll give fluid, and I will see for any electrolyte abnormalities, and I will correct them, and any coagulation abnormalities, and based on that I will reserve blood and inform blood bank regarding that, and pre-medication I will give injection ranitidine 50 mg I'll give IM, and injection metoclopramide 10 mg IM I will give, and 30 ml of 0.3. Sir, metoclopramide IMs.
So why do you want to give intramuscularly? We can give very well orally.
So IV.
See, when the patient is coming for emergency surgery, there is no time. So that time we used to give IV, Rantac, and Perinam. That's the standard. The time is there. You can very well give both the drugs orally. Okay. All right then. And this patient initially wanted labor anesthesia, and we could not give it. the patient is more anxious. So would you like to give some anxiolytics like diazepam?
No, sir.
Why? Patient is anxious.
Because it may cause neonatal depression and respiratory depression and poor ABGAR score. So I will try to avoid benzodiazepine in the patients. I'll try to explain the procedure and try to console the patient.
Okay, so you'll be giving a reassurance to the patient, not the benzodiazepine pre-medication. Okay, so we given the pre-medication, we given the aspiration prophylaxis. Okay, then
I will shift the patient in a left adipose position, left lateral position. Then I will secure 2 large bore IV cannulas and I will start IV line. Then I will shift there to OT.
again, you have to tell this is a standard terminology for not for this patient. So suppose you want to secure IV cannula, I would like to secure a 18 gauge cannula on the left dorsum of hand and then connect the lactate fluid. Like that, it should be we should not allow the examiner to ask some other question. Like you are telling 2 large bore cannula, I will not be asking. I should not be asking which hand, which gauge, what fluid, like that. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Then I will shift her to OT, connect the monitors. I will.
And while connecting, patient is telling, sir, I'm slightly having some headache, like that.
She may proceed on to severe eclampsia or to it can be even before she may go for seizure. She may sensor like that. So.
But patient is you are touching the monitors, and that time patient is telling, probably sir, I didn't eat breakfast. That is why I'm having headache probably. So what do? Patient is telling I'm having headache.
I will immediately.
The patient is complaining of headache. What does that? What do you mean by that? Do you understand?
Imminent feature of eclampsia, she is going to throw seizures.
Okay, good.
So I will ask my. So I will immediately connect the monitors, keep 100% oxygen, and.
So may not go into seizure, but that is a feature of severe preeclampsia. Okay, that is.
Also check for other imminent signs like visual disturbances, headache, nausea, vomiting. Those signs are you check can say the patient is could be going for eclampsia.
Okay. So what do you do next?
I will load using magnesium sulfate. I will load.
Why do you want to give magnesium sulfate? Sir? Patient is having some headache. So why do you want to give magnesium sulfate?
No, sir. I will load and keep magnesium sulfate 5 grams for IV route and.
So patient is like us, another doctor told, patient is telling, yes sir, I'm able to see some flashes of light. I'm able to see, and sometimes I'm having some, since early morning, I'm having some blurring of vision. So she's having blurring of vision, flashes of light, and headache.
Prophylactically, I will give magnesium sulfate, sir.
So why do you want to give magnesium sulfate for this patient?
Magnesium sulfate is a drug of choice for eclampsia in pregnant patients, sir, because it will. Sir?
Yeah, good, very good, yeah.
Because it will inhibit the GABA GABA receptor, so it is acting in that way in pregnant patients, and also.
What receptor is acting?
GABA, GABA.
NMDA receptors?
No, sir, GABA aminobutyric acids.
Okay.
And also it will act prophylactically, sir. So I will give a magnesium sulfate in the intravenous route 5 grams over.
What are the mechanisms of action of this magnesium sulfate? there are several proposed mechanisms are there, because not a single one is there. There are several mechanisms there.
In central nervous system, sorry sir, it acts through NMDA receptors, N-methyl aspartate receptors, and in neuromuscular junction, it will inhibit the acetylcholine release. Inhibit the acetylcholine release, sir. It also decreases the cerebral irritability by reducing the. It acts as a cerebral protective agent, and it will increase the seizure threshold, sir.
So basically, it reduces the. Yeah, go ahead.
And
yeah, correct. So, suppose the patient is on magnesium sulfate, what are the interactions or what are the conditions in anesthesia?
Magnesium sulfate.
What takes is the action of both depolarizing, non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. So muscle relaxant time should be watched out for in case while giving a GA. Because it blocks the acetylcholine receptors. Acetylcholine release on the presynaptic. So you should either start with small doses of succinate choline for integration, and watch for recurrence. Then only start with smaller, shorter action like atracurium for maintaining.
So the atracurium is a shorter acting agent.
It's intermediate.
Okay. So we one thing is it's going to have some interaction with the neuromuscular blocking agents. Okay, what else? What are the other effects or side effects of magnesium sulfate therapy?
Side effects of magnesium sulfate, it can cause fetus, it can cause fetal bradycardia and fetal hypotonia and decrease in ABGAR score, and it can cause hypermagnesemia, may cause respiratory paralysis.
First the magnesium sulfate will cause some effects in the mother, then we'll go to the fetus. So let's discuss the maternal effect, and then we'll go to fetal a bit later.
So initial dosage will start about 4 grams IV, followed by 1 gram per hour. And therapeutic dosage should be maintained to about 5 to 8 milliequivalents per liter. Beyond that, for patient having 10 milliequivalents per liter, patient will have the deep tendon reflexes will be lost, patellar reflexes will be lost. There will be widening of QRS complex, and more than 12 will be respiratory depression can happen in the mother, and more than 25 will be patient with coma or death.
Okay, there will be cardiovascular complications. Okay, so here we have different regimes are there. Okay, Richard or like that. So whatever the regime you are following, for the sake of exam, you would read about what regimes are available. Okay. Now, suppose patient is on magnesium sulfate, how will you monitor the magnesium sulfate? You are going for a PSC, the patient is on magnesium sulfate, you have to find out whether the patient is having any side effect of MAXL. So how will you find out what are the side effects?
So the therapeutic range of magnesium sulfate should be 4 to 7 millicurie per liter, sir. So I will.
Yes, you told yeah.
Deep tendon reflexes should be present.
Okay, when you look for the deep tendon reflexes. Okay, then
respiratory muscle, respiratory depression should not be there, and respiratory rate should be maintained, sir.
Okay.
And
so how this getting excreted, magnesium sulfate?
When there is
renal excretion.
Renal excretion.
Okay, so what else you monitor?
Urine output will monitor, sir.
Okay, so you need to check the urine output there in the preoperative thing. Okay, when the patient is on magnesium sulfate. Okay, then
serum magnesium levels can be monitored every 2 hours.
4 hours.
Every 2 hours, this is not practically possible.
Every 4 hours.
4 hours.
Okay.
4 to 6 hours.
Okay, yeah, maybe you can tell whatever your in-sheet protocol, you can tell that. Okay, now patient is on magnesium sulfate, you have to do few things. So now we come back to our patient. This patient is having mild headache, right? She was having a flash of light and she was having diplopia. Okay, so what do you do? How would you proceed?
Prophylactically, we'll start IV magnesium sulfate, sir. 4 grams.
Okay,
For 10 minutes, I will give through IV route. Then maintenance, I will give 1 to 2 grams per hour, sir.
okay,
And then I'll proceed with if the I'll wait for the patient symptoms, sir, whether it is subsiding or not. If still she is having the same symptoms, then I will resort to other.
Once you start on myself, do you expect the symptoms to decrease immediately? So what is the goal of giving magnesium sulfate? So what is the purpose of giving magnesium sulfate?
Prophylaxis for
Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's going to give us a prophylaxis for the seizure. Basically, we want to reduce the CNS excitability. Okay. So this patient may not have improvement in the symptoms immediately. Okay. So how will you proceed now? You are given Mexel. You are given 5 grams IV or 4 to 6 gram 5 gram. You are given IV. Then
I'll proceed with spinal anesthesia, sir.
okay, fine. Go ahead. So patient is having platelet of 90,000. So you are happy to go spinal. That's acceptable. Okay, go ahead. And we are checking the blood pressure. Blood pressure is showing 100 and 110, 160 to 110. That's the BP.
So now I will reduce the BP, sir.
Okay.
Because it's 160, 110, I will reduce the BP. I will give labetalol, injection labetalol. I will give 10 mg. I will give, and I will wait for 10 minutes for the BP to come down, and then I will proceed with general anesthesia, sir. Instead of spinal anesthesia, I'll go to general anesthesia because the patient symptoms are not controlled, sir.
No, this while after controlling the blood pressure, you can still go ahead for spinal anesthesia. In exams, when to give spinal, when to give GA, that's going to be a controversial thing. So here, what you want to tell is what are the positive findings for the spinal or points in favor of spinal, why I am giving spinal anesthesia. And if you are telling you want to give GA, you tell the supporting things for the GA. So you are free to go. At this point of time, you can give spinal or you can give GA for this patient. Because after this, we are going to give labetalol. Okay. And we are going to reduce the pressures. So after giving the drug, it will become 150/90. Now what will you do? Now, if you look at the patient pathology, at this point of time and this point of time, both the time points, the patient is going to be the same pathology is there. But only we give labetalol, that blood pressure has come down to 60 to 150/90. Okay, so you can consider spinal and GA both. But you, in the exam point of view, you will tell the supporting points why I am giving spinal. Okay, so why did we choose the spinal for this patient? What's the advantage of giving spinal in these patients?
So,
manipulation of the airway, sir. Pre-eclamptic patients with, severe pre-eclamptic patients have very difficult airway.
Good.
And we can provide high quality analgesia and immediate analgesia with spinal, and
Avoid polypharmacy also.
yes, avoid polypharmacy. We can avoid.
Okay. Then what else?
The surgical stress can be
We are
reduced
not-
with epidural spinal anesthesia, sir. And fast.
Okay.
And
So especially, yeah, accepted. But especially when the patient is having all these features, so what else could be another reason? Where you are choosing for spinal? Suppose patient is having any seizure, you will be able to observe it. You can see and try to manage it. Suppose patient under the general anesthesia, patient is having any CNS manifestation, which we will not be able to appreciate it. So that's another advantage they tell for the spinal. Okay. So what's the advantage of GA in these patients?
the airway is secured, sir. And risk of aspiration is reduced.
Okay. In case patient goes for any seizures intraoperatively, we will be having a airway will be secured. Patient will not aspirate. Okay.
And better hemodynamic control will be there with general anesthesia, sir.
Okay, good. Again, all these three things comes. Patient is having these symptoms. So what you can tell in favor of GA?
Sir, during the procedure, if the patient throws a seizure, it is difficult to perform spinal anesthesia, sir. So,
okay, fine. That's also a valid reason. Especially when the patient is having these symptoms, so that means the CNS thing is getting whatever cerebral edema is getting worsened. So if we are going to give GA, this may further get worsened. Okay, this is a point in favor of giving GA and spinal. Okay, so when you choose your technique, you have to tell the advantages of one technique and the disadvantages of the other technique. Okay. Okay. Now what the
I'll go with the spinal anesthesia, sir.
okay, spinal anesthesia, go ahead.
Under sterile aseptic precautions, I will place the patient in the left lateral position.
Okay.
I'll ask the surgeon to left lateral position at L3, L4 space. I'll perform spinal anesthesia with the 25% reduced dose of local anesthetic.
See, you know the patient. You have to tell how much volume you are going to give, what drug you are going to give. Okay.
I'll give 0.5% hyperbaric bupivacaine.
Sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
1.75 ml I will give, sir.
1.75 ml. Okay, 1.7 only is difficult. 1.75 ml. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. So this patient, before giving spinal, would you like to give some fluids to the patient?
Yes, sir. I will give ringer lactate, 500 ml preloading I will give, sir.
So why do you want to give
Yes.
ringer lactate for this patient?
So pre-eclampsia, the patient will be, the intravascular volume will be depleted. So spinal anesthesia will aggravate hypotension in the patient. So I will give ringer lactate to increase the intravascular volume to compensate for the hypotension of spinal.
So are these patients are prone to develop pulmonary edema?
So, PH patients and preeclampsia patients, the fluids should be judicially they should be usually co-loaded, not fully loaded, because there are chances of pulmonary edema. Sir. Because of decreased oncotic pressure, there will be chances of and increased capillary leak. There will be chances of pulmonary edema. So
Okay, so they have chance of pulmonary edema is there due to the increased vascular permeability and your increased blood oncotic pressure. So you have to be cautious. And some of the practices to give a colloid. Okay, but in exams, whatever you do in your hospital, you can tell that. Okay? So you can give ringer lactate. So instead of having a pre-calculated volume of 500 ml, you can tell I'll give 200 ml and I will try to give co-loading. Okay. So this patient we are given a 1.75 ml, we are given bupivacaine, we are given, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And after that, BP has come to 70-40. We made the patient supine. We were given the wedge, and the BP is 70-40. So how would you manage?
With the wedge in place, I'll give phenylephrine 50 to 50 mics bolus. Intermittent bolus I will give so till the BP comes optimum to till the BP improves. Sir.
Okay, why not ephedrine?
Ephedrine is more associated with fetal acidosis, sir. So phenylephrine is most.
Okay. Is there any other reason for avoiding ephedrine?
Children has ability to cross the placental, sir. So that causes fetal hypoxia, fetal hypotension, and causes acidosis in the fetus.
Okay, so that is one of the reason for not giving ephedrine. Okay.
And the target BP, and the target BP should be maintained diastolic of more than 80 millimeters per minute.
Okay, so this BP should be maintained using a fluids co-loading as well as using your drugs. Again, what we missed in the presentation is for anesthesia, you will tell before only how we are preparing the operation theater, what drugs were preparing. That should be a standard for every case. I didn't go in detail because our crucial discussion will go off. Okay, so you have to tell how we are going to prepare the OT, what drugs we are going to keep, and what dilation we are going to keep. Everything you have to tell. Okay. So now this patient we are given a phenylephrine. They were successfully managed. Okay, and the BP is improved to 130/80 after giving your fluids and the phenylephrine. Okay, now the baby is being delivered. Now baby is delivered. Now the surgeons are Udishan is telling uterus is not relaxed. So what will you do? Sorry, uterus is not contracted. Sorry.
I'll give oxytocin infusion, sir. I will dilute 20 international units of oxytocin in 500 ml of normal saline. I will use wide open gravity method and I will give IV bolus of oxytocin and see for the response. Sir.
Okay, so how much were given?
10 international units, so half an hour I'll use that. Like, another 10 international units, or based on demand, I'll give over for every 1 hour, I'll give another 10 international units.
Odysseus is telling uterus is not contracted, patient is bleeding from there. So if we wait that much long time, patient is going to hemorrhagic shock. So you need to control as early as possible.
I'll use other drugs like carboprost.
So Odysseus is telling give one methergine.
Methergine is contraindicated in hypergenic pregnancies. I'll give carboprostaglandin F2 alpha 0.2 milligram every 15 minutes, maximum 8 doses I will give, sir. And
okay.
Acid.
Okay, so you were given, you have avoided methergine in this patient and then managed. So luckily the everything was fine, the uterus contracted and they started closing the uterus. Now patient is having pain. He's telling I'm having pain in the abdomen, not in the headache. Now what will you do? Yeah.
I'll check the level of analgesia, sir.
Okay.
I'll make sure it is sufficient.
Patient is having a level of say around T12. So is the T12 is enough for the cesarean section?
Further injection, we need till T4, T5, sir, because T4, T5.
So what the sensory supply for the uterus? You are planning for labor analgesia. What is your target?
For first stage of labor, first stage of labor, I'll maintain the level from T10 to L1, sir. For second stage T10 to S4, sir, I'll maintain, sir.
Okay, then why you want a higher level of analgesia for cesarean section?
Because in cesarean section, the visceral pain, motor fibers are from T5, T6, sir. So we need level till T4, sir. And for traction.
Fine. So this patient will check the level, and patient is having level of T12. So patient is having abdominal pain. He is a doctor. So what will you do? I'll give fentanyl, sir. The baby is delivered, so I'll give fentanyl 50 mg. I will give, sir. Okay, you are given 50 plus 50 fentanyl. Okay, still pain is having pain. In fact, pain is increased after giving the fentanyl. Probably surgeon is physician is keep on pressing, and he is telling a little bit of bowel is coming. I'm not able to close the wound.
Convert to GA.
I'll convert to GA, sir.
Yeah, okay, convert. Go ahead.
Sir, I will induce. I'll pre-oxygenate the. I'll plan for RSI, sir. I'll pre-oxygenate this patient for.
Why do you want to do RSI for this patient?
Because the till 12 weeks postpartum, the pregnant patients are the.
Okay, good. Fine. So you're planning for RSI. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll plan for RSI, sir. I'll dehydrate the patient for 3 minutes with 100% oxygen. Then I will induce with propofol 2 mg per kg IV and.
Okay, so at that time while pre-oxygenating, you are checking the BP is 160 by 110.
I will go to sir. Then I will use etomidate, sir.
Etomidate. Okay, fine. Why etomidate?
Because
you want to change
same scenario 160, 110, sir, or continuing.
Same patient. Probably earlier the BP was 150, 90. Now because the patient is having pain, BP has increased to 160 to 110.
So I'll give. Then I'll give Esmol, sir. Esmol I will give 500 0.5 kg I will give, sir. Bolus I will give 2 minutes before intubation. Then I will give succinylcholine with 1.5 mg per kilogram, sir. Then I will under Sellick's maneuver, I will intubate the patient with 6.5 size internal diameter endotracheal tube with the cricoid pressure. Then after with the polio blade, poliolaryngoscopic blade, then After confirming the tube's position and after inflating the cup, I will remove the silica, sir.
Okay, so you are regularly intubating with a laryngoscopic plate?
No, sir.
Okay, so whatever you are doing regularly, you can tell that, then at least your internal examiner will support you. Okay, fine. Okay, then, yeah, so we intubated the patient, so successfully your laryngoscopy response has been abolished. Suppose the Espanol is not there, what else will you use?
I will use intermittent bolus dose of labetalol, sir. 50 mg I will give. 50 mg I will use, sir. I will intubate, sir.
How much?
IV 10 and 20 mg or 10 mg I will use, sir.
10 to 20 mg.
Labetalol.
Okay, all right, fine. So now we intubated the patient. So how will you manage now?
Then I will now I will start with the oxygen with nitrous oxide, and nitrous oxide I will give 70% and 60%, and then I will give sevoflurane at 1% max.
Okay. So you given oxygen, nitrous oxide, and sevoflurane, and for 10-15 minutes, finish the procedure. Skin is closed.
Yes.
Okay, now what will you do?
Then I will titrate the agent. I will try to taper the agent, sir.
Oh, skin is
And
closed.
for extubation.
Apply the dressing.
And for extubation, sir, when the I will plan with labetalol, sir. 20 mg for preventing the extubation response. Then I will when after adequate section and after complete reversal of the motor response of the patient, and after return of the airway reflexes, I will extubate the patients.
Patient is not responding. Patient is not breathing also. So you close your nitrous oxide, you close your sevoflurane, patient is getting only an oxygen, and patient is not breathing. Spontaneous is not coming, and patient is not awake. What do you do?
I will continue the mechanical ventilation, sir, and I will try to troubleshoot what is the cause of the.
Very good.
I will use neuromuscular monitoring to assess the level of blockade.
Okay, very good.
If it is normal, I try to rule out the other causes and send the investigations for
the neuromuscular monitoring. What will you do?
TOF, sir. The TOF ratio should be less than 0.2. If it is adequate, I will try to rule out the other causes of delayed recoveries, sir. Like
TOF is 0. Okay, fine. So one thing is you will try to rule out a residual neuromuscular blockade. Okay, then what else? Other common causes of delayed recovery.
Try to rule out hypothermia, hypoglycemia.
Okay, so all those things common. Okay.
Metabolic acidosis. Then electrolyte imbalance like hyponatremia. Then
so all these things, all these things can happen. But when the patient is having a case of preeclampsia, who had a headache, this is your patient, no? Who had a headache, blurring of vision, all those things.
I'll suspect stroke in this patient. Any cerebral accident has happened or hemorrhagic stroke has happened, I will rule out that etiology.
Okay. So then what could be the other reason? One thing is a stroke.
Or patient may be in coma.
No, coma is not a diagnosis, no. What is the pathology? What by which patient is having coma? Coma is just patient is not having responding. What is the reason? Okay, so now patient is not responding. What do you do now? You have tried your neuromuscular monitoring, top is 0, and you are suspecting some intracranial pathology. So what do you do now?
I will do imaging of brain, sir, MRI brain. I will do to rule out
MRI brain. Okay. So what you are suspecting? What you are expecting there in the MRI brain?
Intracranial hemorrhages.
Okay, one thing intracranial hemorrhage. What else?
or ischemic stroke and
Necrosis.
Stress. Okay, what is press?
um,
Posterior.
posterior reversible leukoencephalopathy syndrome. Posterior reversible leukoencephalopathy syndrome.
Okay, so we are trying to get MRI done. We are trying to shift the patient by the time the patient is become awake and patient is conscious. Now what do you do?
I will shift her to ICU.
The patient is awake. Patient is still trying to move the hands. Patient is opening the eyes.
Then I will extubate the patient, sir, with the proper
Okay.
suction.
Hmm?
And I will continue magnesium sulfate.
Okay,
24 hours postpartum, and I will monitor her in ICU, sir.
Okay, so immediately post-op, patient is telling I'm having a lot of pain. Physician is asking, sir, patient is having a lot of pain. So I'm planning to give injection Ketorolac. How much should I give? She's asking. What do you tell?
Sir, if the renal parameters are in a normal range, then I will suggest. Then I will accept ketorolac, sir.
Are you worried about only about renal parameters?
I would suggest to go for a low dose tramadol, sir. NSAIDs can be avoided in case of pregnancy in PIH patients.
Okay, so you would like to avoid the NSAIDs in the post-op. Okay, why do you want to avoid NSAIDs?
Because again, vasoconstriction can be happening because of this prostaglandin synthesis. There be vasoconstriction can happen again. So it's worsen the hypertension as well as the end organ renal failure.
Okay, renal failure. So is these patients with preeclampsia, are they prone for renal failure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why there is an increased risk of renal failure?
They're more prone to tubular necrosis, sir, and
Necrosis.
tubular necrosis, and
So it could be a pre-renal cause, or a renal cause, or a post-renal cause. Okay. What could be the pre-renal cause?
renal causes could be due to vasospasm or due to hemolysis that can.
No, pre-renal is usually it's
Hypotension.
hypolemia. Hypolemia, right? Patient is already having a severe vasoconstriction is there. So if probably we are not given adequate fluid, patient can go into pre-renal. Okay. Then what about the intrarenal cause? It told vasospasm.
They'll have a glomerular endotheliosis with mesangial cell swelling and endothelial cell swelling with acute tubular necrosis can happen.
Mhm.
And post-renal, because of obstruction, they can have obstructive uropathy, thereby renal insufficiency can happen.
Okay, so these patients are prone for renal failure. That's the reason we try to avoid the NSAIDs in the post-op patient. Okay, then how do you manage analgesia for these patients?
Can give tramadol, sir. Maybe tramadol. And paracetamol
Okay.
can be given only after checking for liver function test.
Okay. And all that. So you have given tramadol 50 milligram, you have given BD, which is comfortable. And after 2 hours, the physician is calling you that patient is having a seizure. What will you do now?
Again, I'll secure a airway and give 100% oxygen. Make a left
Securing airway is an easy job, right?
left
You yeah. No, you have to tell a timeline. See what we are doing. So you have to tell in a systematic way.
We have to continue magnesium sulfate up to 24 hours post-partum.
Oh, yeah, already what he told is already he is continuing magnesium sulfate. Now, when the patient is on magnesium sulfate, patient is having seizures.
Now I'll start injecting, sir. 50 mg per minute I will give, sir. Injection per minute.
Okay. So if the patient is on magnesium sulfate and the patient is having seizures, what will you do?
Magnesium.
So would you like to give some more bolus of?
Yes, sir. I've been giving the infusion at 1 to 2 gram per hour. So now we'll give a bolus of 2 gram again, and
Okay.
I will continue the infusion.
The recommendation is to give another bolus of magnesium sulfate. If the patient is having seizures after giving the bolus, then probably you can go for the other phenytoin or thiopentone or whatever it is. Okay, fine. Now the patient is having seizures, so you are there in this OG post of ward. Patient is in front of you. Patient is having convulsions. So how will you manage? You told the physician, okay, load magnesium sulfate, give 2 grams IV. They are preparing the magnesium sulfate. So what will you do?
Sir, I'll give 100% oxygen, sir. I will turn the patient to left lateral position.
Okay, first you will turn the patient to left lateral position. Okay. Left lateral position.
Sir?
Why left lateral position?
To prevent aspirations.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Then I will apply jaw thrust, sir, to prevent any tongue fall. Put oral airway. Insert oral airway, sir. Tongue bite I will put, sir, or oral airway tongue bite, smooth the soft tongue bite. Then
the patient is having convulsions, will not be able to insert anything to the orally.
Start with benzodiazepine.
Bag and mask I will use. So bag and mask ventilation I will give with 100% oxygen. Apply pulse oximeter and monitor the saturation, sir.
So you are telling whatever the given in chestnut, no? You are giving the table wise point by point. You are telling that's very good. You read nicely. Go ahead.
Then even if it is not getting controlled, then I will go for thiopentone, sir. I'll go for some thiopentone at 75 to 100 mg, sir. I'll give IV bolus and then I'll to stop the seizure, sir.
We have to see the beat. We have to check the blood pressure again, sir. We have to see if it is again high, and we have to control the blood pressure again.
Okay, so you will do in a systematic way. First thing is your ABC, your airway. Make the lateral position. Try to prevent the aspiration. Then, if possible, you can try to maintain the airway. by giving a jaw thrust, or if possible, try to put a nasopharyngeal airway, not a oral airway. Then, if the pain is not breathing, you can do a gentle back mask ventilation to maintain the oxygenation. Okay, then then others can help you now.
You give benzodiazepines to stop the seizures.
Yeah, okay, fine. The pain is still convulsion. You can go ahead and give a anything, phenytoin or benzodiazepine, 5.1, whatever it is. You can try to. Okay, fine. So how long you will continue the magnesium sulfate?
24 hours postpartum.
So already 2 hours is over.
22
So
hours. So for another 22 hours, you can continue the magnesium sulfate.
Okay, it should be after the seizures, you have to give after 24 hours, not after the postpartum. Okay. Okay, then. So now successfully extubated the patient after 1 day. Patient is happy, and Vigneshwaran has met the doctor. She is very happy. Sir, you have saved my life. And she's a preemie, and she's asking, sir, I want to go for a second baby. Now, first experience is very bad for me. So, will I get this next time? What will you tell her?
There's still possibility, and I'll.
He's asking why you were telling why, like what risk factor I'm having. So what is the risk factor I'm having, so that the next pregnancy also I'll be having this PAH.
First pregnancy she was diagnosed as PH, means second pregnancy she again can have PH. So that is one of the risk factor, and
Okay.
And I will ask her to take some prophylactic medications like vitamin C, calcium, and low dose aspirin to.
What is the evidence says? We have vitamin C, vitamin E, aspirin. So what is the recommendation?
Calcium and aspirin, they are having proved that they can prevent from PH. Vitamin E is controversial.
The aspirin is the one which is the aspirin. Rest of things there is no evidence, but still we can give it. Okay, then.
Calcium 2 grams supplement can be given. It has been proven this, but vitamin E is controversial, sir. It can increase hypertension.
Okay. Okay, all right, fine. So now actually, I think the time is up. The main thing, what points we have not discussed is there is going to be kind of a template. So that templates you have to follow during the initial case presentation and for anesthetic management mainly. Okay, so anesthetic management, for example, you were telling your preparation of theater, drugs, how do you pre-oxygenate, how do you do induction, everything is a standard thing. So that is going to be useful for any case. So you have to be write in a paper and then point by point, which you will be repeating for every case. Like that you have to be prepared. Okay. So all of you can read well for the exams. I hope your answers are reasonably good. So best wishes for your exams. I think that's all from my side. Over to you, Dr. Ranjan, please.